It felt like something out of a dream. $600 million in inheritance and the family business in our hands. My sister-in-law, Emma, couldn't hide her excitement. When she started celebrating my father's fortune, I noticed the employees began murmuring amongst themselves. They seemed thrilled, but Emma, with an air of triumph, raised her voice. Let's keep it down. This is the moment my husband will inherit the company and the $600 million. Out of nowhere, one of the employees started laughing uncontrollably. What's going on? Emma asked, looking baffled. My older brother, sitting beside her, was holding the will in his hands, reading it quietly. As his eyes scanned the page, his face went ashen. Take a look at this, he muttered, showing the will to Emma. Her reaction was immediate. She screamed. My name's Lena, and I'm 27 years old. I've worked for my father's company for as long as I can remember. Dad had the foresight to start a business from scratch when he was younger, and over the years, it blossomed into a moderately successful enterprise. We had many employees, and the business grew bit by bit. However, I always knew it hadn't been easy for my father. Even as a child, I could tell how much stress weighed on him, especially in those early days when he had to juggle a mountain of debt. Despite the company's growth, I wanted to pitch in and help, especially with my mom, who mostly handled the clerical tasks in the back office. Though my parents urged me to go to college and follow my own path, my heart was set on one thing: working for the company my dad had poured his blood, sweat, and tears into. It was my dream job, the only thing I could imagine doing after high school. When I joined the company, I was lucky enough to be mentored by Bob, a longtime employee who had been there almost from the beginning. Bob didn't treat me like the boss's daughter. He was patient and taught me the ropes, guiding me through the ins and outs of the business. I owe a lot of what I know today to him. Then there was my brother, Frederick. He's just 2 years older than me, and while I decided to jump straight into working for Dad's business, Frederick went to college to study management. From a young age, he'd boast his college friends about Dad owning a company, making sure everyone knew he was next in line to take over. His friends would ask, "What are you going to do after graduation, Frederick? Are you going to start job hunting?" Frederick would always respond with confidence, "I don't need to look for a job. I'm going to work at my dad's company and eventually take over. I'm in no rush. I'll gain management experience first." It wasn't long before his friends grew envious. "Wow, Frederick, your future's set. You're going to be the company's president, and your life's all planned out. I'm jealous." But one of them asked a question that stuck with me. "Frederick, don't you have a younger sister? Won't there be some competition between you two over who gets the company?" Without missing a beat, Frederick laughed it off, saying, "Yeah, I have a sister, but she's just a high school grad. She's pretty simple-minded. She does some behind-the-scenes stuff for the company, but once I'm president, she'll work for me, as long as she knows her place." While Frederick lived it up, spending lavishly and socializing under the pretense of gaining business experience, I kept working in the background. People flocked to Frederick because they knew he'd inherit the business, and women constantly pursued him, hoping to land the future president of the company. Frederick eventually married Emma, a beautiful and extravagant woman. Their wedding was grand, and soon after, they jetted off on a luxurious honeymoon. When they got back, they built a mansion and settled into a life of opulence. Frederick would tell anyone who asked that it was all part of preparing to become the company's president. Emma, of course, enjoyed the high life. Frederick catered to her every wish, making sure she had all the luxuries she desired. Their lifestyle couldn't have been more different from mine. I worked quietly alongside my mother, managing the administrative tasks that kept Dad's company running smoothly. Emma, however, didn't shy away from making her thoughts known during family gatherings. "Lena," she'd say with a smirk, "you don't really look like the daughter of a CEO. You don't act like the president's child at all." "I don't care much for that kind of lifestyle," I would reply, brushing off her comments. She'd look at me, almost pitying me, and say, "I feel bad for you, Lena. You were born into wealth, but it seems like you don't even know how to enjoy it. You still live with your parents, work hard, and for what? Shouldn't you be spending more of your money on yourself? And shouldn't you have guys lining up to be with you, considering your family status?" Frederick would always chime in. "That's true, Emma. Lena's always been so humble. It's no wonder people don't realize who she really is. She's too modest, even with the employees at work. Well, that's because there's still so much I need to learn about the business, I'd explain. A lot of my coworkers are more experienced than I am, so I can't just act like I'm in charge. Frederick, always unimpressed, would shake his head and say, "That's exactly why you'll never be fit to run this company. A good leader needs to stand tall and command respect. Leave the small tasks to others and stop trying to do everything yourself." In moments like these, I often thought about what Dad had taught me. Never look down on others, no matter how successful you are, he'd say. But whenever I tried to share my thoughts, Frederick would cut me off. He'd roll his eyes and say, "You know, Lena, men don't like women who try to act all logical." And of course, Emma was quick to follow his lead. "If you keep talking like that, Lena, you'll never get married. You need to make yourself more appealing, don't you think?"
Fredrik grinned.
"Yeah, well, when I'm president, I might just fire an employee like you." With those final words, they would leave. My mother, who'd stayed quiet through it all, would wait until they were gone and then turn to me saying, "Lena, you're doing a wonderful job at the company. Don't let your brother's words get to you." Dad would give a stern nod in agreement. He and Mom had always been vocal about their disappointment in Frederick's attitude, but after one too many arguments, Frederick and Emma stopped visiting our house altogether. It had been over a month since we'd last seen them. I vividly remember the gloomy atmosphere that surrounded us back then. So, trying to ease the tension, I said to my parents, "Frederick and Emma can say whatever they want. It doesn't matter." After that, Frederick and Emma continued living their extravagant lives, dining at high-end restaurants and vacationing at famous resorts. It was clear they were doing all of this to project the image that Frederick would soon become the president of our father's company. At the time, my father was busy working hard to expand the business. One night, though, everything changed. While we were at home, he suddenly complained of chest pain. "Dad, are you okay? Just relax. I'll call an ambulance," I said, panicking as I grabbed my phone. As we waited for the ambulance, my father gestured weakly towards a drawer. "Lena, get this," he said. I quickly opened the drawer and found a letter. "I want you to read this if anything happens to me. The rest is up to the lawyers," he said, struggling to get the words out. Then, right before the ambulance arrived, he lost consciousness. Despite our efforts to rush him to the hospital, he never woke up. He passed away, leaving us heartbroken. Frederick and Emma were away on yet another vacation when Dad died, and they didn't return until 2 days after the funeral. When they finally arrived, Frederick had the nerve to say, "Well, we're just glad we made it in time. I never imagined Dad would pass away while we were on holiday." I was speechless. They showed up with no sense of urgency or sorrow, as if it wasn't a big deal that my mom and I had to handle all the funeral arrangements without them. Later, I pulled Frederick aside, out of earshot from the employees, and asked, "Couldn't you have come home earlier? You knew Dad wasn't doing well." But Frederick brushed me off without a shred of remorse. "I couldn't, Lena. Our return flight was already booked." Then, without missing a beat, he turned to the employees and, in the most self-assured voice, said, "Thank you for your support. From here on out, I will honorably take my father's place as president." Emma, always quick to feed his ego, chimed in, "That's exactly what Frederick would do. I mean, look at everyone. They're speechless because they're so impressed, right? It's only natural, given his dignity." I could hardly stand to be around them, but I reluctantly led them and the employees to the meal ceremony after the funeral. Frederick, of course, continued to act like he was already the president. As we sat down to eat, he complained, "Lena, is this really the food you chose? The quality is disgraceful. It tarnishes Dad's reputation as president." I held back my frustration and replied, "Mom and I made these decisions together, Frederick. And frankly, I don't need you telling me how to handle things." But Frederick wasn't done. "This just proves why you'll never understand what it means to be president," he said smugly. "You should let the employees handle all this menial stuff." He wasn't just ordering me around either. He turned to Bob, the longtime employee who had mentored me for years, and started giving him commands. You serve this better. Do it right, he barked. I rushed to intervene, but Frederick wasn't listening. You're bold, Frederick, but Bob is one of Dad's most respected employees. You can't talk to him like that, I said, trying to de-escalate the situation. Frederick, however, just scoffed. Why should I show respect to an employee? These people need to show more respect to me, the future president. As if things couldn't get worse, Emma decided to jump in. Lena, stop talking back to Frederick. He's the company president now. If you keep defying him, he has every right to fire you. Just as the situation was spiraling, a man entered the room. Excuse me for the interruption, he said calmly. He introduced himself as the lawyer our father had hired years before, entrusted to handle the inheritance. That's when I remembered what Dad had said shortly before he died, that everything had been arranged with a lawyer. It was clear that Dad had been thinking ahead, planning his will long before his health began to decline. Frederick and Emma's eyes lit up at the mention of the inheritance. They eagerly invited the lawyer to join us. Thank you for coming. Let's get this done as quickly as possible, Frederick said, already assuming the wealth was his. As they spoke, Frederick, with a quivering voice, asked, The inheritance. It's worth $600 million, right? Emma, barely containing her excitement, squealed, $600 million? This is like a dream come true. The company and that much money. It's all ours now. Some of the employees exchanged whispers, likely shocked by the scene unfolding. Emma, basking in the moment, raised her voice again. Quiet, everyone. This is it. Frederick is officially inheriting the company and all the money. But then something unexpected happened. One of the employees started laughing uncontrollably. What's so funny? Emma snapped, clearly irritated. At that moment, Frederick had the will in his hands, reading it carefully. His face, once so full of pride, turned pale. Emma, the will, it says the entire company goes to the eldest daughter. To Lena, he stammered, his voice trembling with disbelief. He stared at the will for a long time, and then he began shouting, This can't be right. This has to be a mistake. The lawyer remained calm and simply stated, This is a legally binding will. Frederick, now visibly shaking, tried to argue. How could Dad leave the company to Lena? Maybe he was getting old and lost his senses. A will written by a senile man can't be valid. Hearing this, something inside me snapped. I couldn't let them disrespect our father like that, especially not after everything he'd done for us. Enough, I yelled. There's no way Frederick could run this company. He never cared enough to even help once. Frederick's face flushed with rage. What are you saying? That I'm not fit to be president? Without hesitating, I replied, Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Don't be ridiculous. Emma and I even built a house fit for a president. We went to great lengths to look the part. Frederick shouted, his frustration mounting. I couldn't help but scoff. Do you mean building a mansion with money that wasn't even yours? Or dining at expensive restaurants? That's not how you run a business, Frederick. It's just money to you. Didn't Dad pay for most of your house and your extravagant lifestyle anyway? Frederick glared at me. How would you know that? Just before he died, Dad left me a letter. I replied calmly. In it, he detailed all the money he spent on you and Emma. He made it clear that all of those expenses were gifts during his lifetime. As a result, your share of the estate is next to nothing. Emma's face turned pale. Wait, what? Is the inheritance not worth $600 million? Did we already spend all of that? She stammered, her panic rising. An employee who had been watching the scene unfold approached Emma and explained, The $600 million comes from the company's value, not from personal assets. I believe everyone here knows that. Emma blinked in confusion. Wait, what? Money from the company, isn't that part of the inheritance? She asked, bewildered. I stepped in again.
No, Emma.
The money from the company stays with the business. It doesn't go to the family. So yes, your share is practically nothing. Frederick stood up suddenly, a wild look in his eyes. You want a plain woman like Lena as your company president? He yelled, addressing the employees. I'm just as charismatic as my father. How can you think she's more qualified than me? None of the employees spoke up in agreement with Frederick. Instead, Bob, the veteran employee, stepped forward. Frederick, your father was a charismatic leader who built this company from the ground up. But you're not the same. What you have is arrogance, not charisma. You look down on us. Frederick's face flushed with anger. How dare you speak to me like that, he shouted, trembling with rage. I'm an employee of this company just like you, but I don't have time for the day-to-day work. I've been too busy networking on behalf of the business. Bob remained calm. Networking? Is that what you call going on lavish trips and enjoying your nights out? While you were doing that, Lena was here, working hard every day, learning everything there is to know about the business. The room was silent for a moment before Bob added, She has the same sincerity as your father. We all believe she's the right person to lead this company. The other employees nodded in agreement, some even applauding. I was taken aback by the support but managed to say, Thank you. I'm as surprised as anyone by all of this. But I care about this company as much as my father did, and I'll do everything I can to continue his work. I'm grateful for your support. The employees applauded warmly, and in that moment, I felt a surge of determination. All of you are valuable to this company. Anyone who doesn't respect the people who make this business run is unfit to be an employee, let alone the president. Frederick, now seething with frustration, turned to me. What are you talking about? I'm your brother. I met his gaze and replied firmly, and you told me yourself that if you became president, you'd fire me. Well, I can't afford to pay someone who doesn't contribute, even if that person is family. Frederick's face twisted in disbelief. This is ridiculous. Someone say something. He looked around, desperate for support, but the employees only stared at him coldly. Realizing no one was on his side, he grabbed Emma's arm and stormed out. After that day, Frederick lost his position at the company. He tried to survive on the small inheritance he'd received, but it wasn't enough to maintain his lavish lifestyle for long. Eventually, he came to me, his eyes pleading. Lena, can you lend me some money? I couldn't hide my disgust. He had lost everything, but instead of finding a job, he continued to rely on others. No, I told him firmly. I won't give you any more money, and neither should Mom. One by one, Frederick's friends abandoned him once they realized he had lost the position of president. And as for Emma, who had once dreamed of being the wife of a company president, she found no sympathy from her social circle either. With their finances in shambles, Frederick and Emma were forced to sell their mansion. The money from the sale allowed them to maintain their old lifestyle for a while, but without a steady income, it wasn't long before the funds ran out again. When they finally accepted that they would need to work, they found that no one would hire them. They had no real experience, and their reputations as entitled and lazy preceded them. Frederick eventually found a part-time job at a convenience store. It wasn't the glamorous position he once envisioned for himself. His coworkers, many of whom were much younger than him, often told him his work was inadequate. Emma, too, had to swallow her pride. She took a job as a cashier at a supermarket, working long hours for a low wage, far from the life of luxury she had once mocked others for. Meanwhile, I threw myself into the work my father had taught me. With the help of Bob and the other employees, the company continued to grow. The unity within the team became stronger than ever, perhaps even as a result of everything that had happened with Frederick. I've vowed to continue working hard, not just for the sake of the company, but to honor my father's legacy. I know that, wherever he is, he's proud of what we're building.